Welcome back to Smash Class. My name is Ramses, and today I will be guiding you through the neutral game once more. Last week we looked at the long range and we talked about how you cannot really win games at the long range, and we mostly use the long range to set up a strong mid-range. Well, what is a strong mid-range? That is what we're going to be answering today as we get into the mid-range aspect of the neutral game. Let's get into this week's episode of Smash Class. So you might be wondering, Ramses, what is the mid-range and what is the difference between the mid-range and the long range? Well, something that we discussed in the long range video is that we don't want to win the game at the long range, and the reason for that was that options at the long range are often reactable. So you can throw out your projectile, but your opponent can often react to it and mitigate it. In other words, there's no real counterplay going on. You can throw out your projectile, but it's beatable on reaction. So you're never going to be able to beat the opponent waiting for your projectile. In other words, if everything is reactable, you cannot really win. Kind of like if we played rock, paper, scissors, but I can react to your options. If I can react to your options, you will never be able to win. So what we do is we use our long range to set up a strong mid-range. Well, let's take a look at that mid-range. As you might have guessed, the biggest differentiator between long and mid-range then is that at the mid-range, your options are not reactable. However, here's the fun thing about the mid-range. There are only a few options at this mid-range that are not reactable. So the most common one that most characters have, minus a few, think something like Link and Hero, who have a little bit of a slow dash attack, but most characters have a fast enough dash attack that's unreactable from a range just about what Lucina is standing at here. So let me show you. If I press dash attack, it comes out very quickly, very hard to react to. Maybe you can barely do it, but oftentimes it's going to be nearly unreactable attacks right there. So another option would be to do something like a rising aerial, right? So I can run up and do like a rising aerial like that, you know, and it's very hard to react to, and it covers a lot of space in a very short amount of time, kind of like a dash attack. So these are the core elements of what enables the mid-range, is this idea of interception tools. So they try to intercept the opponent as they try to do things themselves. So at the mid-range, these interception tools allow you to mix up your opponent. Again, if this move is unreactable, they have to do things preemptively to beat these moves. Now, if they're doing things preemptively, we can hit them for doing things preemptively by reacting to it. So we have this dichotomy where on one hand we have initiative, which we can stuff our opponent out with, and on the other hand we have reaction, where if they go first we can react to it and hit them for doing something like that. So you should sort of see it like an RPS triangle, right? Kind of like rock, paper, scissors, but in Smash terms. So one of the options in our triangle is going to be this interception, right? So these options, they are fast, but they are laggy. So if you remember frame data, we have our startup lag, our active frames, and our end lag. So oftentimes these moves have very low startup. Active frames doesn't really matter, but they have a lot of end lag. So if our opponent waits for these options and they avoid these options, then they can punish it. So that's the next option in our triangle, right? So the first one is interception, but interception loses to waiting. So waiting can be done through shielding or jumping or dashing back, right? So either through avoiding the opponent's attack and then punishing them afterwards, or through shielding it and punishing them afterwards, right? So you're trying to abuse the high lag. So again, we have this initiative-driven interception, and then we have this more reactionary waiting style. For example, if I go for a dash attack like this, Mario could jump over it. Or if I go for a rising forward air like this, Mario could shield it and then punish me afterwards. What beats waiting? Well, here comes the final option, and it's going to be setting up a good situation. The easiest way to do this is by doing a landing aerial. I don't know if you recall, we talked about landing aerials a few episodes ago, and they're really strong because they have almost no end lag, because the landing animation of these moves are extremely quick, right? They're quicker than basically every ground move in the game. However, the issue with these landing aerials is that it takes a while for your jump to become a landing jump, and while you are waiting to land, you are a sitting duck in the air. And this is where the interceptions kind of come back in. So if I know my opponent's going to try to set up on me with a landing aerial, I can try to intercept them with my rising aerial. Right? So keep that in mind. We kind of come full circle. We can intercept, but then we lose the waiting, and if we wait, we lose the setup, and if we set up, we lose the interception. So this is the core of our mid-range, where we have this sort of triangle of options that beat each other, and now you just have to read the opponent and understand what they're trying to do. This is the absolute basis of mid-range, and there's a lot more depth to it, right? So another aspect of the mid-range is that you can go both to the long range as well as go to the close range. right? So movement is another option that plays into the mid-range. So say that you're playing a character like Mario who doesn't really have a sword, cannot really contest Lucina in the mid-range over here with her big sword, you probably want to get into the close range. So rather than trying to hit Lucina in the mid-range with maybe like your interception or setting up a good situation, you might instead try to punish her through entering the close range where you are then stronger. Or a character like Samus might, instead of engaging with Lucina in the mid-range, run away, go into the long range, and set up a good situation there. The key to all of this is space and time. So in terms of space, we got to keep in mind, we got to identify this mid-range scenario, and then we got to keep in mind that we cannot just play the mid-range scenario, but we can also change the situation through our use of space. We can go into the long range, we can go into the close range, and play from there. And then time is what we talked about with the RPS triangle, right? So interception is fast but laggy, setup is slow but lagless, and then waiting is all about trying to mitigate these options through keeping your options open, right? So you're always playing to the idea of time, right? You're playing to the idea of startup, you're playing to the idea of end lag. And there's always going to be some sort of opportunity cost to every option that you do, and it's your job to figure out, okay, if this option is hitting me in the neutral game, then what is the opportunity cost of this option that I can then abuse to get a strong hit in on them? The RPS triangle is just a way to make this opportunity cost a little bit more easy to figure out. So really try to figure out what your character can do at the mid-range. If you have a sword, you probably feel right at home in the mid-range. If you're more of a close-up fighter, you might want to focus more on next week's video, which is going to be on the close range. If you're more of a long-range fighter, then you need to understand how your opponent plays in the mid-range so you can counter that aspect of their play and then get into the long range where you are strong again. In other words, even if you don't play a character that excels at the mid-range, you need to understand the mid-range so that you can counter your opponent who might prefer to play at the mid-range. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode of Smash Class. It's tons of fun to do every week, and I hope to see you guys next week as we close out the neutral game portion of this video series with some close range information. Hope you guys have a great day, and of course, stay smart.